Yo, what is going on? PartTimerZack here. In today's video, I wanted to talk about the 5 reasons to help you get out of gold. And so if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It helps me and the YouTube algorithm understand that you like the video. But let's go ahead and jump into number 1. So number 1 is that you practice too much or not at all. I see a lot of people who don't put any effort into actually aiming. They don't practice their aim. They don't do anything around their aim. And then I see the opposite, where people spend hours and hours in an aim lab or practicing their aim right before a game. And one analogy I kind of wanted to use here is a lot like sports. You wouldn't do a lot of practice right before a big game. For example, on the day of your game, you wouldn't practice for 2 or 3 hours because you'd be fatigued. You wouldn't be able to play very well in the game that you're actually participating in. So I do kind of caution to reel it back a little bit on days that you're going to do heavy comp matches and stuff like that, because practice is a good thing, but I would recommend doing your, 2 to 3 hours or whatever on an off day that you don't really feel like you're going to be playing comp, or you're really just practicing that whole entire day instead of, doing that right before a major game or major comp games, because it really is just going to give fatigue in many different ways. This may be kind of a laughable kind of thing, but your arm can become fatigued, or your decision making becomes fatigue. And that's something that's real, is decision fatigue. You can have something like, you're in aim labs and you're just aiming a bunch, you're making all these decisions, even though it seems like very small decisions at the moment, it really does fatigue your brain into a purpose where whenever you're actually in the ranked match, you're not making good decisions because you're fatigued from having to practice so much. So what I would say is to kind of reel it back to about 15 to 30 minutes before you actually play. If you're planning on playing ranked all day, it's good to do something like 30 to 15 minutes there just to get a good warm up, and then go into it, and then have those off days where you're not going to really be playing too much to practice for an hour or two in something like aim labs. And I definitely want to talk about how to better your aim and stuff like that in another designated video, so we're not actually going to talk too much about it. I just wanted to talk about that, as well as crosshair placement. This kind of goes into a similar thing where you're not looking at the right elevation and stuff like that. You really need to be aiming where you think the person is going to be coming from first off, and right where your crosshair is going to kind of be for head level. You don't want to be aiming at their feet or chest. I see a lot of people kind of aiming at the ground for some reason, so just make sure that your crosshair placement is somewhere around the head level. You kind of get a little bit better as you play. Obviously, you start to understand where people come out of, as well as where their head range is. Alrighty, so for number 2, I'm going to be talking about you rely on your teammates too much or not enough. So this is kind of a double-edged sword. So if you rely on your teammates in a solo queue too much on gold or below, it's going to become kind of a problem with wanting to have your teammate trade and stuff, or the lack of communication or the lack of strats. Especially in this rank, it does seem like it's kind of a mix-up of people who don't really care about their rank. They're not really trying to improve overall. They're just kind of playing to have fun or whatever. And then you have the people who are actually trying to get something together, try to rank up a little bit, get out of gold. And it can really hinder your experience when you're really relying on those teammates to trade with you, to make the right stats and stuff like that. So it doesn't always have to be kind of a solo thing, but you need to kind of understand that some of the things that you're going to want to do, you're going to have to play a little bit safer, or even kind of adjust to the way your teammates play, which, kind of sucks for you or whatever, having to kind of make that adjustment and play around your teammates. But you're going to have a lot better of experience whenever you do stuff like that, because you're going to be able to kind of control how you play, but you can't control how they play. And the opposite side of this is you're solo queuing and you're just running in. You're like, okay, I have the best aim on the planet. You're trying to take fights that you shouldn't be taking anyway. I understand the lack of communication in these ranks, like I said, are pretty much like inefficient. Like nobody ever really talks, and sometimes you have to kind of take matters into your own hands. You also need to try as hard as you can to make a communication bridge at some point and say, hey, looks like I'm going in, this site. Can you guys come with me, or something like that? I haven't had too many toxic teammates recently. That was kind of a different thing at the beginning of Valorant, but it's kind of shifted a little bit, and I've had roughly some good teammates, at least 2 or 3 that are willing to actually try, and 3 is a lot better than 1. So just make the effort to make a communication gap there, communicate where you're going to do and what you're going to do. And also, one thing I would recommend, if you have friends and stuff like that, obviously the more is merrier whenever you get into this stuff, because usually you and your friends can really play off of each other. So do okay queue if you can. That's what I try to do. Solo queue seems to be like the worst way to go, but obviously if you don't have anybody on or anything, you got to do what you got to do to get those ranks up. So number 3, you don't have the right game sense. Now, game sense is something that is hard to practice because you kind of just have to play. There isn't a lot of aim labs type of things that can really give you game sense. You can play deathmatch on Valorant, which is one thing I recommend you do for your aim, to get a good idea of how to headshot and that crosshair placement. That's not going to necessarily teach you how people are going to play it in rank, because on deathmatch people are just trying to get kills. They're running out, they're doing stuff that they wouldn't normally do. And so at that point, I would say play unrated, which is going to be kind of a little bit similar to rank. Again, people aren't playing unrated in a sense where they really care. It's usually kind of a warm-up thing, so they're kind of doing things that they wouldn't normally do, but it would give you the right direction and what you need to know as far as what's somebody going to peek, what's the common places people plant, what's the common places people hide when they plant, and just being able to play the ranked games. I understand that people don't want to play ranked because, oh, well, I want to get the best rank. I don't want to lose games in my rank and my comp matches, but at the end of the day, you really really have to just try, you know, if you're a bronze or something like that, just try to play as much as reasonable and try to get that game sense and really focus on, okay, so this is how a bronze player plays, this is how a gold player plays. And then as you kind of go into the next ranks and say, you'll kind of get an idea of how each rank plays. I would say that gold and below is really hard to kind of master because people play randomly. Like I said, because it goes back to that other point where people are kind of just running around. Some people care, some people don't. And as you kind of grow out of gold into plat and diamond, you'll understand that there's more structure and there's more reason to why people are doing things, which becomes a little bit easier in game sense wise. I know it sounds weird. In reality, it becomes a little bit easier at pre-firing and pre-peaking things because people have a reason to be somewhere and they're usually where you think they're going to be. Whereas in silver and gold, and usually people are hiding in weird spots and they don't really have any strats. So just make sure you're playing as much as you can in the right sense and try to make sure you're understanding your game sense and your self-surrounding. You might also be taking fights that you shouldn't. I see this happen a lot, and I also do it myself, where you think that you kind of frag out a little bit, you kind of peek things that you shouldn't peek, and then all of a sudden there's 3 guys there and they gun you down. So it's just a matter of trying to understand what fights you should or shouldn't take. Sometimes you're a little bit too passive, you're playing too far back on site, they're able to get up on the site and overtake A or B or whatever, and it should have been the fact that you should have kind of kept there and fired back a little bit to kind of get your teammates back around. But that's something that you kind of learn as the game sense kind of works, and you start to understand, okay, well, I shouldn't have taken that fight. So just make sure whenever you're in a fight, check out the things that you did wrong. Okay, did I peek and there's 3 guys there? How should I have peeked last time? Should I have wide peeked that, or should I have, you know, jiggle peeked it a little bit to get some information? If there's too many people, maybe I need to back off. You need to play your life in a lot of these situations. As you kind of grow into the ranks, that you'll be able to play into trades. My teammate will be able to trade me, and you'll be able to understand kind of where and when to take certain fights. Alrighty, so number 4, we're going to be talking about not using abilities correctly or at all. I see a lot of silvers, a lot of golds that are just either not using their abilities at all. I'm looking at you, Sage, with your ult to revive people. I'm just kidding, but we did have a couple of people in the games that we played today that they just don't really play with their ults. They don't really know when the right times to use their ults, and they're kind of afraid of messing up an ult, so they'll kind of hold it until the perfect moment. In all honesty, it's a matter of understanding that sometimes you're going to waste an ult and sometimes you're going to have a perfect ult. Okay, so once you get the understanding of, like I said, the game sense, and you'll be able to understand, okay, well, they're rushing, maybe I should do a killjoy ult. I play killjoy, so having an idea of when to retake or take a site is kind of a catch-22. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes they're not even there and it doesn't really even work or matter, and then sometimes it's, you know, the best play in the world. I get a bunch of people to move off the site, we take the plant. So just don't be afraid to use an ult. I would rather somebody mess up an ult than never use it for the whole entire round and then switch over. That becomes very frustrating, especially somebody who has a Sage or something like that can really turn the tables, because a revive on like a 2v3 or 2v4 or something like that, making it into a 3v4 can really turn the tides there. So making sure that you're ulting and making sure that you're understanding when and where to ult and not worrying too much about if it's going to fail or not, you know what I mean? And that kind of goes with not just ults, but any ability. Sometimes you flash yourself. Try to get an understanding, okay, well, next time I won't bank it off that wall. I won't curve that, you know, like that. I won't flash my teammates. You will get a little bit of flame, I'm sure, from your teammates if you accidentally, you know, execute a bad flash, but it's better to try to flash and try to use your abilities than to just hoard them throughout the whole entire game and never use anything and never do anything. So just make sure you're using your abilities or watching people and how they use their abilities and some key aspects of where to, you know, shoot a Sova arrow, where to put a killjoy turret, and just understanding where the best common spots are. And they may or may not work out for you. Just make an understanding of what needs to be done when it needs to. Alrighty, so number 5, you just simply haven't played enough. I see a lot of people who have varying ranges of skill, and I mean beginner skill. So there's some people who just come into the gate and they're the best. Maybe they played CSGO for years and the game sense kind of just transfers, the aim kind of transfers. They don't have to do too much. They understand the abilities, and you're thinking to yourself, man, I've been playing 10, 20, 30 hours. I understand that's a lot of time, but you got to realize that some people put hours and hours and hours before they even get to a point where they're actually good. I understand that there's people who put thousands of hours and they're maybe still in gold or silver, and hopefully the other tips kind of help you, because some people who play like 1,000 hours haven't ever really messed with their DPI or their sense. They haven't really done anything for aim practice. So just having an understanding that maybe I haven't played enough, maybe I haven't really worked around, because I find myself getting frustrated and be like, okay, why am I still stuck in this elo? But then I got to remind myself, I haven't played as much as a lot of people have. If you're taking breaks, you got to realize that people aren't taking breaks. There are people who have been playing since the beta and have not stopped playing since the beta. So there's a lot of people who know how to jiggle peek to do all this stuff, and to catch up, you're going to have to put it in, you know, those hours. You're really going to have to catch up, and it kind of varies on your skill level as well as how well you learn things. So don't compare yourself too much to your friends. I have a friend that can pretty much pop off on any FPS he ever plays. He never really has to practice much, and he gets up to plat and diamond. It's really hard for me not to compare myself, because obviously we have a little bit of banter between each other. You know how I suck or whatever, and he's really good. But at the end of the day, if I put in the effort and the work, I can actually become better, or, you know, a little bit, because you got to realize for somebody like that who's just naturally naturally gifted, they don't really put a lot of time into some of the tips that I talked about. They usually just kind of play and they just stay around that level and hover. So if you're somebody who's maybe gold for a little bit, but you do some of these tips, you'll start to realize that they're not doing that, and you start to hit a higher ceiling than they can because you're willing to put the work in. So just make sure that you're not relating yourself to others too much, and that you got to realize that you learn at a different rate, and how you learn is because it's not just always monkey see monkey do type of stuff. You really got to find your own way and what works for you. So hopefully you guys like the video here. Make sure to let me know down in the comments if you want some more points here, as well as that practice video about aiming. I could definitely make one of those, but right now you're going to be seeing two videos. One is what YouTube recommends you watch, and the other one, well, that's what I recommend you watch. Either way, guys, have a good rest of your night, guys. Peace.